Swiftaroos, in part 4 of our video series building the Showrunner app, we're going to show how to take user input from a text field and use it to customize the API call to the TVMaze service, returning information on TV shows that a user is searching for. And as mentioned, this series is a midterm solution for an actual exam given to my brilliant and talented Swift students. So first we want to set up a view controller to accept the user's search. So we're going to add a new view controller. We're going to position this to the left of all of view controllers in the main storyboard. We're going to create a Swift file to associate with this view controller. We're going to call it search view controller. We're going to embed that new view controller in a navigation controller, and we're going to set it so that it's the initial view controller. So we'll head to Xcode. In the main storyboard, we'll open the library, search for a view controller, and drag it to the left of all of our existing view controllers. Now let's create a file for this. So I'm going to click just above shows so that this new file goes above list view controller, and I'm going to select new file. This is going to be a Cocoa Touch class because we're subclassing UI view controller, and we'll call this search view controller. And we can get rid of some unneeded comments, head back to main storyboard. With the view controller selected, we'll head up to the inspectors, select the identity inspector, and select search view controller. Now we can see that the view controller is associated with that search view controller file. Now we can head down in the lower right-hand corner and embed this view controller in a navigation controller. Next up, we want to set this navigation controller as the initial view controller, so we'll click on that. We'll head over to the attributes inspector, and right under view controller, underneath where it says title, we'll click on is initial view controller, and you can see that this inbound arrow shows that this is where our app is going to start. Next, we want to design a user interface that looks like this one. We're going to need some assets that we downloaded in the very first video. That's going to be the logo and also a sound that we're going to play. We're going to add an image view. We're going to anchor it 7.5 and 16 and 16 to the top of the safe area and the left and right of the safe area. We'll keep the aspect ratio the same. We're going to add the Showrunner logo. We're going to refer to this in our code as image view. We're going to add text that says search for a TV show. That's going to be system bold 24 midnight. We're going to constrain it 20 from the top of the image above it, and 16 and 16 from the safe area. We're going to refer to this in our code as search show label. The reason why we're going to refer to a static label in our code is because we're going to be animating the static label as well. Normally we don't create IB outlets for static labels. Now we're also going to add a text field. That's going to be font Avenir Next condensed to 24. We're going to constrain it to the top of the label at a standard margin about 7.5, and we'll constrain it left and right at 16 points from the safe area. We'll refer to this as search text field. We'll add a button with the label search. We'll constrain it 20 from the top of the text field above it, and the width will be 120 and height 30. We'll call this search button. We don't need to have an IB action for the search button in here. Now this UI is going to be too big. The keyboard is actually going to obscure it if we run this on very small devices like the iPhone SE First Edition, but I put in this block of code that our students have actually used before. I put it in here for a quick copy and paste for our exam. We'll dismiss the keyboard if you click anywhere outside of the text field that you're entering in. So let's go ahead and build this. Now let's take those assets that we downloaded in the first video and put them in our assets catalog. So we'll click on assets.xc assets. Now I also included an optional app icon for this app. So in order to be able to take advantage and use that, I'm going to click on the app icon placeholder that's in the asset catalog. And I don't need this placeholder because I'm going to replace it. So I'll press the delete key and it's gone. And now I've stored my resources on the desktop. They're in my Showrunner resources folder. I'm going to drag over my app icon set. We see that now I have an app icon, and I'm also going to highlight these other two items, the Showrunner logo and the TV startup sound. Now we can head back to the main storyboard. Now I'll add the image view by clicking on library and searching for image view. Drag it over onto my search view controller. I'll position it by the margins, drag it edge to edge. Then under the attributes inspector for the image view, I'm going to select the Showrunner logo. Then I'm going to constrain this. These points are going to be to the safe area, 7.5 to the top, 16 to the left, 16 to the right. I'm going to constrain the aspect ratio and click on add for constraints. Next up, I'm going to add a label. I'll position this below the image view. I'll add the text inside of it that says search for a TV show : Now for the font, I'm going to keep it the system font, but I'll set it to bold and to size 24. I'm also going to set the color to midnight, which is still in our recently used colors. I'll drag this label so that it's at both margins, and then I'll constrain it so that it's 20 points from the logo above it and 16 and 16 to the left and right safe area margins. Then we're going to go ahead and add a text field, so we'll grab that, drag it so that it touches the left and right margins for the safe area. I'm going to change the font to custom font Avenir Next condensed and set that to size 24. And we'll constrain this text field 16 and 16 left and right and 7.5 to the label above it. And finally, we're going to add a button. The title of the button should be search. I'm going to constrain this 20 points from the text field above it, and I'm going to set a fixed width and height to 120 width, 30 height, add 3 constraints, but then we've got to go over to align and align it horizontally in container and add 1 constraint there. Notice once we do that, then our button resizes and it shows the correct width and height that we constrained it at, and everything's looking good. Finally, we'll head back to our exam. I'll copy this little chunk of code, then head back to the search view controller, and I'll paste this in viewDidLoad right under super viewDidLoad. And again, that's going to dismiss the keyboard when we click outside of the text field. Now we want to create IB outlets for these different interface elements, so I'll click on my search view controller, option click on main storyboard, so I'm in assistant editor mode, and we'll control drag over to create the IB outlets. The image view will be called image view. The static label that says search for a TV show will be called search show label. The text field where the user will enter the show that they're searching for will be called search text field, and the button will be called search button. And you can click on some of the view as options to make sure that the constraints are working properly. They are. So let's head back to our exam. Next, we'll clean up our view controller. So we no longer need the view controller that the list view controller is embedded in, so we'll delete that, and then we're going to create a segue from the search button in the search view controller to the list view controller, and that'll put all the view controllers in the same view controller stack. So back in the main storyboard, I'm going to click on the segue from this old navigation controller into the list view controller and delete that by pressing the delete key. Then I'm going to click on this old navigation controller in the document outline and press delete here, and that navigation controller goes away. Then I'm going to click on the search button, control drag over to the list view controller, select show segue, and we now see we've got all 3 view controllers on a single view controller stack that's embedded in this first navigation controller. Now in part 6 of this question, we want to get the value that's entered in the search text field in search view controller, and we want to pass that over to the list view controller. And the reason for that is we're going to take this little chunk of text, we're going to use it to modify the URL string before we call getData so that we can get the exact list of shows that the user is queried on. So first we need to set up inside of the list view controller a value that can accept what we're going to be passing over from the search text field. And we'll create this as a string that we'll just call search text field. Then we're going to write code back in our search view controller so that when the search button is pressed and the segue is triggered, the value in search text field is passed to the search text in the list view controller. So back in list view controller, we'll declare a variable var search text equals empty string, and we're going to replace that with the value that we're passing over. So let's head over to search view controller, and we actually don't need an IB action associated with the search button because that's going to trigger our segue. All we need is a prepare for segue here. So I'll enter prepare and use code completion to select prepare for segue. The stub is written, and then down below we'll just say var search text equals search text field dot text exclamation point. So that will extract whatever the user put in the search text field. And then we're just going to pass data over the way that we normally do this. Now in this case, we don't have to worry about getting a selection in a table view because there isn't any table view. But we will set up our destination the same way we've done before. Let destination equal segue.destination as exclamation point list view controller. Then all we need to do is pass over the search text value to the search text in destination. So we'll say destination.searchText equals search text. Now, unfortunately, there's one problem that we might face if the user enters a phrase and that phrase has a space in there. Well, we can't construct a proper URL using a space. If the user enters a phrase like Star Trek with a space between star and Trek, that's not going to work. So the way that we do this for API calls is we replace any space characters with %20. And that's a standard you'll see for most API calls. Now that's pretty easy for us to do. We know how to do it with replacing occurrences of. So let's head back to our code. Back in prepare for segue, just after we get our search text value, we'll set search text equal to search text dot replacing occurrences of. The of is going to be a space character, so just a single space in between double quotes, with, and in between the double quotes, it will be %20. That's it. So let's head back over to our exam, and we want to modify shows.swift so that the URL string now no longer has that phrase alien fixed at the end of it. So we're just going to include this first part of our search string. Then in list view controller, what we're going to do is we're going to update the URL string property of the shows variable so that it includes the search text at the end that we just passed over from the search view controller. We're going to do that before we call getData, and when we call getData, that should give us back a set of data that matches the user's query. So we'll head over to shows.swift, and at the end of our URL string, we'll get rid of this fixed text alien in there. We want to end with the equal sign, so delete the word alien. Then we'll head back over to listViewController.swift, and just before we make our call to shows.getData, we'll say shows.URLString plus equals search text. That'll append this new search text at the end of the URL string so that when we call getData, we have a modified URL string that includes the user query at the end. Let's build and run this bad boy and see how things look. Hammer time, no errors. Here's our app. I'm going to enter Star Trek. I'm going to click on search. And we see we've got a list of all of these TV shows that have Star Trek in their name. Looking good. So at this point, I think we're ready to paraphrase Mr. Spock and say, code swift and prosper. Fun fact, Leonard Nimoy, the actor who played Spock, attended graduate school at Boston College, my university. That'll be it for this video. In the next one, we'll show how we can use the segmented control to sort the results in the table view.